Last Christmas Eve, my parents dragged me out to the mall along with my little sister. Early on in the night, I got bored and knew I wouldn't be able to stand shopping for clothes any longer. I convinced my parents to let me go explore the rest of the mall while they got presents for me and my sister. But of course, in typical fashion, they only agreed to it if I took my little sister along with me. I agreed and promised that I would call as soon as we were ready to leave and meet up at the Foot Locker. We walked around for a little while, but there was still nothing that piqued my interest. My sister, however, really wanted to see Santa. Not that she believed in him really, but she thought the concept of Santa was funny for some reason. Anyways, we got lined up in the center of the mall where they had a bunch of fake North Pole scenery put up around a Christmassy house that was supposed to be Santa's cabin or whatever. Nobody could actually see Santa because you had to go inside the cabin to meet him and get your pictures. Because we couldn't see, we had no idea why it was taking so long for the line to move. With 20 or 30 people ahead of us, the estimated wait time was almost an hour, but it's where my sister wanted to go, and I didn't have any better idea, so we stuck it out. Unfortunately, after about a half an hour, the soda that I'd had at the food court was hitting my bladder. I really had to take a leak, so I told my sister to go on without me or to hold my place in line if she was still waiting when I got back. Then I raced off to the nearest restroom. Just a few minutes later, I was done, and I went back to the Santa setup to see that my sister was no longer in line. I figured she was inside the cabin, but after I saw a few people go out and no sign of her, I got confused and decided I should check inside. I tried to tell them what happened, but those heartless helper elves didn't care at all. I pleaded with them to just let me check, saying that I didn't want to take any pictures and just wanted to make sure my sister was okay. But they didn't believe me. They just wrinkled their noses and told me to get in the back of the line. Not knowing what else to do, I did. And everybody in the line gave me weird looks while I walked back. I was even more annoyed when I saw that the line had doubled in size since I left it. I was fuming the whole time I waited, mad at myself for leaving the line and cursing out everything in my head. My sister didn't have a cell phone, so she was basically helpless without me. I was responsible for her, and if I didn't get her back, I was going to be in some deep trouble with my parents. So I waited, and waited, and waited, until finally, after a ridiculous amount of time, I got in. As soon as I stepped in, a chill ran down my spine. It was super dark in there, and it smelled kind of funny. To my left was the Santa, but I've never seen such a wrong guy to play the part. He was all scrawny and ghoulish with sunken-in eyes and a patchy beard. The only part of him that was fat was his ginormous beer gut, which was way out of proportion with the rest of him. He was hideous. I couldn't tell if he was trying to do a Christmas or Halloween thing, but I'd come all the way, so I had to try talking to him. Hello? Have you seen a little girl with dark hair about this high? Probably laughed at you instead of asking for presents?
Whoa there, kiddo. Aren't you gonna ask for presents?
No, I don't care about presents. I'm just looking for my sister. This is the last place she was at. Have you seen her?
Oh, come on. I won't be cheesy like all the other Santas. You don't have to sit in my lap or anything. You just have to pick one of these 3 presents here.
The presents were laying in his lap. A blue one on the left, a green one on the right, and a red one in the middle. I hadn't noticed them before because, well, who wants to look at the crotch of somebody who looks like that?
Not sure? I'll tell you what. If you let Santa do his job, Santa will help you do yours.
You mean you'll help me find my sister?
Of course!
Well, all right then. Merry Christmas, I guess.
That's the spirit. Come here and take your pick. I'll give you a hint. I really recommend picking the red one.
I looked him up and down suspiciously. I wasn't a complete moron. I knew what he might be trying to do, but I wasn't sure. In spite of him, I pointed to the blue one.
Wrong! 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 Wrong!
He screamed, picked up the present, and hurled it against the wall. A bunch of Christmas chocolates exploded from it and went everywhere.
Hey, what are you doing? I'm telling you to pick the red one.
No, I picked the green one.
You just think you're hot stuff, don't you? Well, let me tell you something, you little snaggletooth twink. I eat punks like you for a living. Is that what you want? Huh? For me to turn you into next year's chocolate?
Dude, what are you even saying?
Don't play dumb with me. Just pick the red one already. Come on, you want to find your little sister, don't you?
Fine, I picked the red one. He took the lid off the box, but I couldn't see what was inside it. The demented Santa waved his hand for me to come closer, and I did so with extreme caution. I peeked my head over and saw that it was full of candy canes, all different shapes, colors, and sizes.
Like what you see? Go ahead. Grab the biggest candy cane you can find and eat it.
Oh God, why am I doing this? I put my hand inside the box and fished around for a few seconds. I couldn't feel anything that seemed obviously bigger than everything else, until something at the bottom of the box was wrong. Really wrong. I jerked my hand out of the box and jumped back. I was about to curse out the Santa, but when I saw him again, I was speechless. He had completely unhinged his jaw and was laughing at me like a psychotic inhuman demon. I began to exit the cabin when the psychotic Santa lunged up from his seat, sprinted across the room, and cornered me against the wall. That's when the Santa pressed his demented face against mine and handed over the red box, saying,
"Merry Christmas, and make sure you eat the biggest candy cane last."
Instinct took over and I broke away at the last second, sprinting through the exit. That's when I found my sister, huddled up against the wall by herself eating a candy cane. I slapped it out of her hand, grabbed her by the arm, and took us back to our parents. When we finally reached the Foot Locker, I asked her, "What were you doing in there while I was in the bathroom?"
Nothing. I was just eating a candy cane that Santa gave me while I was waiting for you.
I was really freaking out and had to call my parents right away. They raced over to us and I told them everything. They immediately called the cops, and a few minutes later, that sicko was in handcuffs, despite him being locked away. It won't ever change what happened. This is the image of the quote-unquote candy cane Santa. He was a 63-year-old Arkansas native who worked as a mall Santa at a local plaza and was arrested for his heinous crimes. The minimum sentence of his charge was 18 days, or a maximum sentence of 1,587 years. I think it's safe to say he'll be sharing candy canes in prison going forward.
Here are 3 disturbing Netflix stories that are just downright terrifying. After watching these, some of you may have doubts if someone ever invited you over for a Netflix and chill outing. Anyways, here's what the stories looked like. The story I'm about to tell you transpired last winter as we all anticipated the coming of Christmas. Kevin lived alone in a cottage house in the countryside. He had a few neighbors, but the distances between their residences were far apart. In addition, those folks seemed to be the homebody types who rarely invited anyone to their place anyway. So, as a result, he rarely interacted with them. It got a bit lonely at times, so going on Tinder frequently became a way for him to escape the isolation. Then, after a while, he eventually met this attractive girl named Stella. She had long brunette hair, simple makeup, and to top it all off, a pretty smile. She was definitely Kevin's type. So, after sending her his first message, it felt like they instantly made a connection. They'd text each other often, and to ensure she wasn't a catfish, they even FaceTimed. Then, a few weeks later, he invited her to drop by the house to chill by the fireplace while watching some movies on Netflix. When Stella finally arrived at his house, he opened the door and welcomed her in. As the hours passed, they had a few glasses of wine, and one thing led to another. We'll just leave it at that. Then, moments later, Stella changed into Kevin's clothes and expressed her desire to stay overnight. Naturally, he was delighted, but since she was also looking for something to munch on, Kevin offered to drive them to a nearby McDonald's since he lacked the cooking skills. She scoffed, initially expecting that they could enjoy some comfort food at home that would make the experience more intimate. But soon after, Stella nodded and agreed to tag along. Then, as they opened the front door, they saw a hooded man looking in their direction on the street in front of the house. And as they glanced at the pile of snow outside, they noticed footprints leading up to the front door.
Who the hell is that guy? Do you know who that is?
Stella held Kevin's hand tightly and said,
I have no idea.
Kevin then noticed how anxious Stella was. Hence, he stood still as he stared at the man from a distance. And so, he knew that his best course of action was to remain indoors. Kevin immediately closed the door and locked it shut. For the next couple of hours, they watched various chick flicks on Netflix, hoping they could divert their attention away from the man who stood like a scarecrow. But since Kevin just wanted to chill while keeping them safe at the same time, he turned off the lights, closed all the curtains and windows, and double-checked that all the doors in the house were locked. As Stella and Kevin sat comfortably on the couch, watching to their heart's content, there was an awkward silence filling the air, until moments later they heard the sound of bricks, waking Kevin from his semi-stupor, thus prompting him to head for the window. Then, as he slid the curtain ever so slightly, his heart skipped a beat when man standing in front of his house was the same hooded man from moments earlier. The sky was dark, and the only thing he could make out at the time were the constant fall of snowflakes and the silhouette of a man whose head slowly turned to face him as though he knew he was watching. But then, one of the most horrifying things occurred when suddenly he began to sprint towards the window. Stella was terrified as Kevin told her to
Stand back!
However, nothing was more terror-stricken than hearing the man slam his fists against the window, screaming like a lunatic.
What are we gonna do?
Stella asked frantically.
Don't worry! Follow me!
Kevin grabbed her hand, directing her towards the kitchen. Then, as they began calling the cops, a hooded man broke in through the window. Stella ran upstairs while Kevin hid underneath the table in the kitchen. He kept himself silent, controlling his breathing to avoid drawing attention to himself. However, as the footsteps became louder, giving him the notion that he was close by, suddenly, the sound just vanished. Then, as Stella hid inside the closet, covering her mouth as she cried, she heard blood-curdling screams coming from downstairs. Certain it was the voice of the man she cared for. She was in shock, not knowing if she should wait it out, make a run for it, or help her significant other. Fortunately, seconds later, she remembered she had a cell phone in her pocket, so she took it and immediately dialed 911, while whispering on the phone as the operator told her to stay calm and hidden while the cops were on their way. All this time, Stella remained still as the screaming downstairs finally ceased. However, the creep burst into laughter like a maniac, causing her entire body to tremble. Moments later, the cops finally arrived, bearing witness to the horrors left behind by the culprit. Eventually, Kevin's body was found lifeless on the ground in the kitchen, soaked in a puddle of his own blood. Stella wailed in agony, her knees dropping to the ground. After careful observation, they reckon the creep escaped through the kitchen window, tracking him down by following the footsteps on the snow, leading them to the nearby woods. It was difficult to see the path clearly due to all the snow, but as one of them checked behind the bushes, the killer was seen crouching, with his hands drawn up as the police apprehended him. Later on, he was brought to the police station to be interrogated, and when he was asked about his intentions, he said,
She told me we'd keep in touch. She promised we'd always stay connected. So, who was that guy? And why the heck did she choose him and not me? No. I can't let her be with anyone else but me. If I can't have her, no one else will.
And that's when it all made sense. The culprit happened to be Stella's jealous ex-boyfriend. He had admitted to stalking Stella everywhere she went since their breakup, which ultimately led to Kevin's demise.
It's been arduous raising my daughter as a single parent. After all, she was abandoned by her very own mother. Damn that hoe. When my daughter was only a year old, my wife left us for another man coming from an affluent family. So, every night, I prayed for that wretched witch to burn. However, the Christmas season is usually when I try to keep the darkness to myself and allow my daughter to enjoy the holidays. And so, on a Black Friday, I dropped by Walmart to buy a Christmas tree with my daughter. It was packed like hell, like vultures that only care about what they can get. Everyone grabbed appliances left and right. Some were pulling each other's hair, while others stepped on those lying flat on the ground, heedless of their screams. I scurried towards the tree section, where there were 2 large Christmas trees amidst a bunch of small shitty trees, and one of them seemed to have caught my eye. There was something about it that made it look a little more interesting than the rest, and so I went in for a closer look. However, as I started tugging on the leaves to check what material was used, I was cussed out, not by someone in pursuit of the tree, but by this enigmatic green person in front of me.
What the hell is your problem?
The man said as he shoved me to the ground. I'm sorry, man. You just blended in with the trees. I was going to buy the last big tree. Having a close resemblance to the Grinch, his brows furrowed, and with sharp teeth, he grinned and replied,
Well, whoever told you this was your tree? It's mine, you hear me? One step out of line, I'll grab something of yours and squish it!
As I got my bearings, I stood up saying, Excuse me? I didn't catch that. Did you say your tree?
That's right, Buster. So, if you're looking for a big one, then go get your tree from the forest!
Unable to tolerate this unfathomable behavior, I stood my ground, letting him know that I was determined to buy this tree. My little girl was frightened, her body trembling as she said,
Dad, can we go now?
Not yet, sweetie. This is only gonna take a minute.
Is that what you told your wife? Now get the hell out of my way!
The Grinch then grabbed me by my collar and slammed me across the floor, from one side to the other like a rag doll. Disorientated, I felt that if the Grinch didn't stop, it would be the end of me. Hence, I hollered calling out to security, and when they finally came, I told them about the Grinch and how he violated my rights. There were 3 of them and just 1 of him, and so, the security team warned him that if he remained conspicuous, they would have no choice but to report him to the cops and have him apprehended. It was evident that the man was furious, and eventually walked away as he grumbled incomprehensibly. I couldn't help but feel victorious when I grabbed the last big tree and finally bought it. When we arrived home, my daughter and I set up the tree together, and on Christmas Eve, we watched a heartwarming film next to the fireplace as the fire popped and crackled. Then, while my daughter waited for Santa to arrive, I noticed her head bobbing and eyelids slowly drooping. That's when I decided to take her to bed, convincing her that all her presents would appear underneath the Christmas tree the following morning. But this time, my daughter wasn't the only one yawning. I too was feeling drowsy, and so we headed back upstairs, tucking her in before returning to my bedroom, instantly hitting the sack. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of heavy footsteps coming from downstairs. But aside from the heavy steps, I heard screeching noises that gave me chills. What the hell was that? I muttered to myself. When I got up to check the time on my watch, I saw that it was 3 a.m. I couldn't go back to bed. Curious about the sounds, I got up and swung the door open. I noticed something odd coming from my daughter's room. The door to her bedroom was open, so I assumed she was the one making the noises downstairs. But then, I quickly realized that there was someone else down there when I heard a male's voice coming from the living room.
Stupid tree! Should have relinquished it while they had the chance!
The moderate tempo of my heartbeat accelerated as the noises grew disturbingly louder and more bizarre. Hence, I sprinted down the stairs and saw with my own eyes the same man I met at Walmart from before. It was the Grinch, with his filthy green complexion and sinister grin, and with him was a sack full of stuff he might have stolen from me. He carried it on his shoulder as he also dragged the Christmas tree toward the front door.
Hey, stop right there!
I hollered, making every attempt to intimidate him.
I'm armed. If you know what's good for you, put that down.
Then pull up! I dare you to square up, you little shit! This is my tree now! You ain't gonna ruin my Christmas this year, pal!
I gulped, afraid to get myself in trouble again, or worse, be killed. Hence, I allowed him to get away with it, hoping my surveillance cameras were all in good condition so that I could provide enough evidence of this psycho barging into my home. As he drove off in his truck, I called the cops, telling them everything that had transpired. The worst part is that he didn't even have a license plate.
Damn it, all this trouble for a stupid tree.
I said in frustration. I locked all the doors and waited for the cops to arrive, and once they came, they checked everywhere downstairs, including the rooms upstairs, in search of clues that could identify the suspect. Then suddenly, my heart sank upon noticing that my daughter was nowhere to be found. She wasn't in her room hiding, nor was she in the kitchen.
Lisa? Honey? Lisa?
I frantically called out her name, but she never answered back. That's when I concluded that my daughter may have been in that sack the man was carrying on his shoulder. Of course, the cops promised to investigate and fill me in on the details. However, as time passed, the case went cold, and since then, I've had to spend Christmas alone with nothing but mere pictures to remind me of my daughter.
I remember this one tobogganing park in my old area that me and a couple neighborhood friends used to play at. It was Christmas break, and nothing mattered except who won the snowball fight, who made the best snow angel, and who could reach the top speed on their toboggan. It was a blast, and I was having fun, but I wasn't able to appreciate it as much as I could have. One of the neighborhood kids that we didn't really vibe with as much had come out with us that day. I wanted it to just be me and my best friend. We functioned best as a duo, and this weak third link was getting in the way of things. Not that we hated him, he just kinda sucked at everything. When I raced him down the hill, my friend stayed at the top to track who was the fastest. I was, of course. The neighborhood kid was slow in more ways than one. I got to the bottom a full 10 seconds before he did. It was during that brief moment that I spent alone at the bottom of the hill that I saw something really strange. Something that in the moment, I didn't know would spell the end of all the good times. Way in the distance, through a light thicket of trees, I saw a face that didn't belong on the body it was attached to. It was unmistakably the face of Winnie the Pooh. It had the classic golden color of honey and the black beady eyes. But the man I saw with that face was almost inhuman looking. Not to say that he looked like a Pooh Bear exactly. He was haggard and filthy and all around just a bone-chilling sight. And of course, the moment I saw him, he saw me too, and he didn't look away. We stared at each other from across the distance for what felt like eternity.
Hey, what are you looking at?
What? Oh, that guy right there. Do you see him? I think he painted his face to look like Winnie the Pooh. Funny, isn't it?
No, man, that's not funny. You gotta stay away from those people.
What are you talking about, dude?
I've heard stories about creeps who dress up like that. They're bad news. Come on, stop looking at him and let's go up the hill before you attract him over here.
Okay. I guess that kid had more brains than I gave him credit for. But at the time, I had a burning curiosity about what I'd just seen, and it was overriding all common sense. Of course, I didn't mention it again around the neighborhood kid. I noticed he always looked at me funny after that. Instead, I waited for him to leave me and my friend alone for a second. Then I set up a meeting. Hey man, you bored? Yeah, been feeling weird today. Don't know why. I bet it's because of that stupid third wheel kid. What do you say we come back here around 10 tonight? Have some more fun without him dragging us down. Sure man, I got you. Low key? Definitely low key. I didn't tell him why I really wanted to come back. I was worried he'd say no, so I just played it off that I wanted to toboggan more. Neither of us had cell phones at the time, but I did, however, carry a flashlight in my pocket. I went early and waited for him on my toboggan at the top of the hill. When he showed up, we rode down one more time, but before he started going back up, I stopped him. Hold on a second, I want to show you something. Show me what? You'll see. Just leave those here. We'll come back for them later. We won't be long. I led us through the sparse bit of woods and over a small hill. I remembered exactly where I'd seen that creepy Winnie the Pooh wannabe standing. When we got there, it started to snow again, and my friend wanted to turn back. What are you trying to show me, man? I don't see anything. Just a little bit farther. Come on, man, don't wuss out. I saw a well nearby, nestled a little deeper into the woods. It was dark and creepy. It probably hadn't seen any use since colonial times, and at this point it was barely more than a cobblestone ring. The moonlight was shining directly down into it, and I thought I could see the bottom, so I threw down a snowball. That's gotta be about 10 feet. Let's climb into it.
Let's what? Are you crazy?
I didn't bother arguing with him. I knew that if I went, he would follow me just because he didn't want to be alone out there. You're gonna get me into so much trouble, man. Wait for me. See? 10 feet.
Holy crap, look at that tunnel though.
For whatever reason, there was a long horizontal section under the well before it went down any further. After about 100 feet, we came across a sharp turn. It was tall enough for us to walk through. We slowed up, peeked our heads around the corner, and there they were in the opening. Dozens of them, men, women, and children, each and every one of them with a sloppy tattoo of Winnie the Pooh plastered across their faces. They were tangled up with each other and muttering some sort of chant. We were both in shock, but my friend couldn't keep it together. Blood and honey, blood and honey, blood and honey. He retched, alerting the entire tribe to our presence. All at once, they stared us down with these soulless animal eyes. The second I saw one of them step towards us, I split. Run! I ran as fast as I could looking for an exit, just hoping that my friend was running behind me. I sprinted all the way back and scrambled out of the well. I fell into the snow topside and waited for my friend to come out, but he never did. I waited for several minutes and called his name 100 times, but there was no response. I knew before long that one of those freaks had gotten him. That's the moment when everything became blurry. I realized I was completely alone out there with nobody to help me, but also nobody to know what went down. Shaking and sick to my stomach, I stumbled back to our toboggans, which were already halfway covered in the snowfall. I finished the job of burying his toboggan and took mine home, where I pretended like nothing had ever happened. I felt like I'd gone crazy. I never told anyone what happened since. I was too scared of going to jail. My best friend has been a missing person for so many years now. I've tried to go back to that park to make myself feel normal, but it's ruined now. Every time I go in the winter, I swear I see my friend's face staring at me from the trees, always painted like Winnie the Pooh, just like them.
I've never told anyone about this. I've been suppressing it for over a decade now. It was back in the year 2009, when I was a much younger and naive girl back then, just 18 years old. In those days, apps like Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat either weren't popular like today or didn't exist at all. The thing that was big back then was this instant messaging service called MSN. That was what everyone used to talk to each other at those times. At the time, it was a cold and gloomy winter. I spent most of it staying warm indoors, bundled up with hot cocoa, glued to my MSN. I often talked to a dozen people at once. I had over 100 friends, but I didn't actually know that many people. Most of them were random friend requests that I accepted because I wanted to seem more popular than I actually was. I'd only known like 4 or 5 of them in person, but I pretended that they were all my friends, despite the fact that the only way we knew what each other looked like was by our profile pictures. The reason I stopped using MSN was because of this guy that I had met on it, who we'll call Kip for the sake of the story. From his profile, Kip seemed like a pretty attractive guy. He had a mustache and long, slicked back hair, and he wore these retro-style 80s glasses. He said he was a senior in high school and 18 years old, just like me, which was what we had in common that started off our conversation. We chatted for several weeks and even flirted a bit here and there. Kip would always refer to me as cutie, which was enough to get to me for some reason. When we found out that we lived just 15 minutes walking distance from each other, Kip would not hesitate to invite me over to his place to watch some movies he rented from Netflix. Me, being naive as I was, I immediately said yes and agreed to walk to his house. It must have been around 15 centimeters of snow, but I didn't want to let that stop me from meeting this guy. When I got to his house and rang his doorbell, he opened the door immediately. That's when I actually saw him for the first time. He looked closer to 80 than 18. That long, slicked back hair that I loved so much was thinning out, and a hairline worse than Miami Heat LeBron, with a wispy comb-over and the crappiest brunette hair dye I have ever seen. He looked sorta like his profile picture, but he was way older and frailer than I ever could have expected. I immediately got the creeps and could only stand there in astonishment.
Well, what are you waiting for out in the cold, cutie? Come on inside.
Okay.
I hesitated, but I was so cold and so worried about being rude that I went in despite my better judgment. As soon as I stepped in, I could hear Kip immediately close the door behind me. He then went in for a hug, and I instinctively pushed him away, but then Kip started pouting.
Oh, are you the shy type in real life?
Sorry, I'm just not a hugger.
Well, that's alright. We've got all night, cutie. Go ahead and take a seat. I'll get the Netflix going.
My coat was covered in sleet, but I didn't feel comfortable enough to take it off. I sat down on the couch and hoped he wouldn't care. Back then, Netflix was still mailing DVDs, and I noticed the only movie he had was a cheesy rom-com that was already 3 years old. He played the disc and then sat on the couch right next to me. My body tensed up, and I was waiting to scream the moment he tried to put his arm around me, but he didn't.
Brrr! It's so cold in here, isn't it? Good thing I made hot cocoa.
That's when I noticed 2 mugs sitting on the coffee table. He leaned over and reached for one, but then he hesitated for a moment and grabbed the other one. He took a sip, slurping really loud while looking me dead in the eyes with a haunting expression.
I made some for you too, cutie. I know how much you like your hot chocolate.
My name is Anna.
Oh, you're just the cutest, Anna. I know. Don't you want some to warm you up after that long walk in the cold?
No thanks. Actually, I really need to use the washroom before I can drink anything.
Let me show you where it is. Kip jumped up and led me down the hall. I raced in like I couldn't wait, but when I tried to close the door, he stopped it by sticking his hand out.
Excuse me, I'm trying to close the door.
Leave it open! I want to watch you use my bathroom, cutie!
How about you give me some privacy?
That's when he started violently banging his head on the door, causing me to retreat next to the toilet. And that's when he said, "How about I watch you make room for the hot cocoa I made you? I made it specifically for you, since I knew you were coming over. Why don't you just let me see you piss so you can return the favor?" The look in his eyes was so insane, so gaunt. In a fight-or-flight reaction, I body slammed the door and managed to shut it closed. Then, I immediately locked it before he pushed back. "Hey! You stupid little tramp! You broke my toe!" I stepped back in fear as I heard Kip banging on the door so hard that I thought he might break it down. "Open this door! I'll get in there no matter what it takes, but the longer you make me wait, the more fun I'm gonna have with you. I'll poke all sorts of little holes all over your body."
Shut up! Get away from me!
"And just where do you think you're gonna go, you brainless bimbo?" My only escape route was a small window above the toilet. I looked around for something to smash it, but couldn't find anything. The first thing I reached for was the shower rod, but as soon as I yanked down the curtain, I made the worst possible discovery. There was a woman in the bathtub. The horrible sight of her sent me into total shock. The hammer that had been used to put her in that state was lying next to her. Not thinking about anything but my own safety, I grabbed it and began smashing the window. After shattering it, I climbed through and landed on the ground outside. I immediately made a run for it home in a panic. I'd snuck out of my house to get there and forced myself to sneak back in so my parents wouldn't find out. When I got back into my room, I cried silently for hours. I deleted MSN and stupidly kept the whole ordeal a secret till now. Since then, I never knew whatever became of Kip or that poor woman. I feel ashamed for never reporting it to the police. Maybe they could have helped her, but it's all too late now.
I recently stayed at a hotel with my parents for an extended weekend over the holidays. We were at one of those really old hotels that used to be super fancy when it was built 100 years ago. It was one of the biggest I'd ever seen, and it was the only place with any vacancy over the holidays when my parents booked the trip. I don't even know why they forced themselves into it. My mom and dad never got along, so they were only doing it so we could pretend like we were some happy, normal family for the holidays. They really didn't plan anything out either, because there was literally nothing for us to do while we were there. The hotel had a really eerie vibe to it. It reminded me of the lodge from The Shining, and once that popped into my head, I couldn't stop seeing the similarities. There were no security cameras in the entire building as far as I could see, and not to mention, there were so few guests in all those big empty hallways and lobbies that it felt like we were completely alone there. And of course, we got snowed in on the first night by a huge storm, so there was no chance of us going out to do anything. The whole time we were there, we did everything to avoid each other. My mom essentially never left the hotel room. She cleaned things even though we had housekeeping and lied in bed all day watching TV on the crappy satellite channels until she passed out at 3 a.m. My dad, on the other hand, was always busy working no matter where he was. He was some kind of old-timey mystery novelist, and would get mad and yell at us if we got in the way of him working.
Get out of here! Can't you see I'm busy working? Go back to the room now!
He set himself up in the center of the biggest lobby and just typed his life away on that stupid typewriter all day long. Then he'd pass out on one of the couches in the lobby. I stayed in the room with my mom for the majority of my stay, bored out of my mind. By the time my mom let the 10th rerun of Titanic play on the TV, I got up and left to do something, even if it was just wandering around. I did a lot of wandering around, actually, but only for the first couple days. After a while, I learned it's not a good idea to be alone in the hallways of that hotel at night. On the third night, I couldn't sleep after my mom went down, so I left the room and tried to find something to look at. It was the middle of the night, and everything was dead quiet. I must have walked a mile through the hallways and not seen or heard a single soul. I started to get lost in my thoughts. Then I rounded a corner and saw him. There was a man at the far end of the hallway, staring at me. He was wearing a Santa Claus costume, except he lacked the big red coat and boots and was just wearing underwear. He stood on all fours like some sort of animal with his back hunched over. I froze and stared back at him. Then he waved at me, calling me over to him.
Hey, come here.
What do you want?
It's not about what I want. It's about what you want. It's Christmas, isn't it? You want presents, don't you?
No, I think I'm good.
Nonsense, you deserve it. Come on, come here. Don't be shy. I'm Santa Claus. You can trust me.
I knew it was a bad idea, but I inched closer. This was the most interesting thing that had happened so far. It was sheer boredom and curiosity that pushed me forward. I walked slowly and cautiously down the hallway, keeping my eyes on him the whole time. But when I got halfway there, all of a sudden, he darted around the corner and disappeared. When I got to the corner, I saw him partway down the hall, peeking out the doorway of one of the hotel rooms, waving at me to come closer again. I was legitimately horrified by the way he looked, but the fact that he actually appeared to be staying in one of the rooms eased my mind a bit. I thought maybe he did have a bunch of presents in his hotel room, so I walked over to his door. By the time I got there, he was standing behind the door, prodding me to come inside. All I remember seeing was the lights turned off in the room. It was pitch black and I could just barely see the man's face. That's when he said,
Come inside, little one. I have all my presents right in here.
Is it okay if you give them to me out here? As soon as I said that, the smile on his face vanished. That's when the most terrifying thing happened. He lunged forward and grabbed me by the wrist, trying to pull me in. I pulled back against him and called out for help.
Help! Someone! Get this guy off of me! Help! Get inside, you spoiled little brat! Leave me alone or I'm calling the cops! Somebody please help me! Shut up and get your presents! There's no cops in this hotel, you idiot!
He almost managed to drag me into the room, but at the last second, I managed to break free. I wasted no time running away at full sprint and raced back to my room. I slammed the door shut behind me, throwing the deadbolt and latching the chain. I then dragged a rug out of the bathroom and shoved it underneath the crack of the door. That way there would be no way on earth anybody could get in. I was so shaken up and paranoid that I checked under all the beds and looked behind the shower curtain. But it was just me and my mom alone in the hotel room. I had nobody to talk to and was forced to internalize the whole ordeal, as my mom was also passed out so severely that she didn't even budge when I made all that noise coming in. For the rest of the weekend, I never once left the hotel room for anything, not even to eat. I convinced my mom to order room service for the remainder of the trip. For some reason, I was too scared to even talk about it while we were still there. I had planned on telling her everything when we got home, but I saw something while we were checking out that kept me from ever even thinking about that while my father was still alive. I was disassociating behind the two of them while they were arguing in front of the clerk at the checkout counter, when I happened to notice something in my father's briefcase which he'd set on the floor beside him. It was overstuffed and wasn't closed completely, and there was the telltale red and white fluff of a Santa Claus costume sticking out of it, along with a half sheet of paper from the manuscript he'd been working on all weekend. There was only one line on it, repeated across the entire pages, that read, "My son is on the naughty list and will pay for it this Christmas."
This story was told from the perspective of a female girl. It happened a few years ago around the Christmas holiday. There was this little girl living in a small house with her parents, and since Christmas Day was approaching quickly, her father began setting up the tree while her mom took care of the Christmas ornaments. The little girl was so ecstatic that it was difficult to contain herself. As the little girl's parents continued to decorate the tree, the girl would chew on her nails while twitching her head to the side like some deranged crackhead. The parents would immediately take notice and began escorting her to her bedroom. The next day, the parents were in the living room, drinking some coffee while watching television. The entire house, including the tree, was completely decorated. That's when the little girl could be seen sprinting down the stairs and towards the Christmas tree, only to be left standing in front of the tree. Her parents were left confused, as the little girl's demeanor, which was once filled with excitement and anticipation, instantly turned to nothing when she saw that under the Christmas tree was merely a carpet with no presents. Unable to contain her disappointment, she asked,
Mom, Dad, where are the presents?
They both looked at each other and smiled, as if her concerns didn't matter. Then, moments later, her mom crouched, patted her head, and said,
You have to wait till Christmas, dear. Santa only arrives on Christmas Day.
The girl then started slamming her fist towards the mother, as both parents had to physically restrain the girl and bring her into the bedroom. It quickly became quite evident on how desperate the girl was to get her hands on those gifts that she fantasized about daily. On Christmas Eve, her parents suggested that she should prepare some cookies and milk. When she asked why, her dad told her that Santa only gives delightful gifts to children that offer him treats. Hence, that's precisely what the girl did. The girl grabbed a batch of cookies and carton of milk and left it on the table accompanied by her mother. The parents figured that they would sneak some presents underneath the tree before the girl would awake the next day. Then, in the middle of the night, everyone went to sleep except for that girl. Her zeal and impatience was so overwhelming that she couldn't hit the hay. Moments later, after hours of flip-flopping around in bed, she heard noises downstairs. The girl immediately got up as she assumed Santa had arrived downstairs. She then snuck out the door to avoid waking up her parents. Shortly after, as she cautiously made her way down the stairs, she slowly became more anxious, capturing sounds like munching and slurping in the living room. The girl then tiptoed her way down the bottom of the steps and saw the most gut-wrenching sight a kid could ever witness. There she was, greeted by a large, ghoulish-looking Santa. He was facing the Christmas tree while munching on the cookies and slurping on the milk carton like a rotten pig. At this point, she wanted to head back upstairs and hide under the bed. However, a combination of fear and curiosity kept her in place. Thus, the girl asked,
Santa? Is that you?
There was no response, and while he remained silent, he put down the carton, slowly turning his head 180 degrees, with a sinister grin revealing sharp teeth and a wet lower lip caused by constant drooling. At first, he just stood there, staring at the little girl as she trembled in fear. Suddenly, the creepy man said,
What's the matter? Cat got your tongue, little girl?
Quivering still, the poor girl stuttered.
You're not Santa?
How rude. That's not how you greet Santa. I believe you've been a bad girl.
He licked his mouth as he tilted his head to one side and said,
Do you know what happens to bad little girls?
The girl inched back, her eyes widening, waking from her semi-stupor.
You're on my naughty list,
he said, in a pitch much lower than before. So, convinced his intentions were much worse than the girl ever anticipated, she cowered away in fear. Then, without time to think, the creepy man went on all fours, briskly walking towards her in a spider-like fashion, with his head still at 180 degrees.
Stay away from me! Mom! Dad! Help me!
Like a rabbit pursued by a snake, the girl made a run for it, but was immediately cornered.
Look at me!
The man's creepy voice lingered in the air, and when she failed to listen, he repeatedly said,
Look at me! Look at me! Look at me!
Unable to run away, she froze in fear once again. Then, moments later, as the creep's head gradually turned to the right, the girl's head also began to turn like she didn't have a will of her own, and was now under the control of this man who was employing some kind of spell. Santa's head kept turning more and more to the right, causing the unfortunate little soul to holler out loud. And oddly enough, her screams couldn't reach her parents. Instead, they were sound asleep, dreaming of their daughter opening her presents, unaware of the horrors that had pinned her down. Then suddenly, the screams vanished, and the girl's head was upside down permanently at this point, her mouth and eyes wide open. Santa's head was in the same position, as he then smiled like a deranged ghoul out of hell.
Merry Christmas!
However, the entity wanted more, and so he made another rotation, this time at 360 degrees, bringing the girl's head back to its original position. As morning came, both parents were so excited to see their daughter that they knocked on her door, only to receive no response. So, they assumed she was still asleep. However, when they opened the door, they saw that her bed was empty. Thinking she was downstairs by the Christmas tree, the parents called out her name as they descended the stairs. As they finally entered the living room, both were speechless and utterly terrified by what they witnessed. They saw the head of the girl on top of the Christmas tree. By the carpet was her limbs wrapped with wrapping paper. There lied a note next to it, saying,
Santa will return next Christmas.
Here are 3 horrific lost episodes of Arthur. The stories do have sort of a conspiracy realm to it, so for any Arthur fans, you may never look at the show the same way again.
It all started when I was walking down the street, waving to my neighbors and smiling just to see everybody. And then I started to hear the familiar, catchy song again. I instantly forgot what I was doing, just started listening to the happy lyrics. Every day when you're walking down the street, everybody that you meet...
Cut! You're doing it all wrong, you idiot!
What the hell are you talking about?
You're not walking in time! Listen to the beat and the rhythm! Got it?
Oh, what do you mean, sir?
Jeez, no wonder you idiots are going extinct. Synchronize your walking to the music. Make your right foot hit the ground on 1 and 3 or 2 and 4. I don't care, just pick one and stick to it!
Okay, sir, I get it now.
Now, go back to the start point, and remember, if we can't get this done by the end of the day, you're gonna be stuck shooting this intro forever!
I jogged back to the starting point of the route I was supposed to walk. What he said about being here forever didn't fully register, till I started taking multiple takes for making the littlest minute mistakes in the shoot. When the song started playing, I tried to focus on it as much as I could, and walk with it like I was told to. But I have to admit, this was all starting to take the joy out of the song. I just tried to sing along with it in my head and act like it was my song that I knew by heart. Every day when you're walking down the street, everybody that you meet has an original point of view. And I say, hey!
Hey! You stupid aardvark! Stop moving your lips!
But I wasn't. I was just...
Think I don't see you mumbling your lips? You better get back to the start point and start again before I stick my fresh pair of Nikes up your...
Oh, okay, sir. I'll do it right away. Please, just let me go. He shoved me to the ground. I took a moment to collect myself and swallow the lump in my throat. Then, I picked myself up and started walking back to the start. Again.
Pick up the pace or I'll break your back like how I did to your mother in high school!
I began to put some pep in my step and sprinted back. When I got there, I had to turn away and wipe the tears from my eyes before they streamed down my face. I took a deep breath and turned to face the route, then waited for the call.
I hate this so much.
Why the hell am I even here? I just have to keep going. I then heard someone call out,
"Action!"
And I did my thing. I wasn't enjoying any of it. I was faking everything. I guess that's why they call it acting. Most of all, I was already starting to hate the stupid song. Every day when you're walking down the street, everybody that you meet has an original point of view. And I say, hey, what a wonderful kind of day, if you can learn to work and play and get along with each other.
You idiot! You're riding the bike too slow! You're cutting out the damn frame! Who in the hell hired the imbecile that can't even ride a damn bike properly?
I think I was already half brain dead at that point. I was just doing what I was told, but I wasn't really all there. I was just walking to this really strange song, doing odd things here and there as my mind slipped further and further away. Slowly but surely, we progressed through the script, and I found myself doing various things on all kinds of stages, but no matter how hard I tried, I always seemed to do everything wrong. You gotta listen to your heart, listen to the beat, listen to the rhythm of the street. Open up your eyes, open up your ears, get together and make things better by working together. This is the last time I ever want to work with a piece of shit like you! You're supposed to frown in this scene! Why can't you bring me the same energy you showed us in the audition? Start again! But at one moment, it all became too much to bear. I collapsed, feeling like I couldn't breathe. I was on the ground clutching my chest from the ruthless amount of takes he was putting me through. All the time spent being yelled at, humiliated, and forced to perform to unrealistic standards I couldn't even understand, without a break, without food or water, and that damn song played through the whole thing, taunting me with all these happy things I was supposed to play out while I was being treated like a dirty animal. What a wonderful kind of day. Hey! Hey, DW!
Hey!
Cut! What the hell is wrong with you? Your glasses are supposed to fly off your face when you fall back, you idiot! From the top! Again! I don't want to keep falling off that ledge. It's breaking my back. I can't do this anymore. Oh, you poor rotten thing. Props! I need tape and a stapler! ASAP! No, please, just let me go home. Let me go! Help! I learned there was nothing that director wouldn't do to his actors to keep them working, no matter the cost to the people inside. He didn't see us as people at all, just fleshy dolls that he could command as he pleased. Eventually, I knew there was just no way out of it. He made sure of that, too. Every day when you're walking down the street, every day when you're walking, every day, every day.
No matter how many years have passed, I can't stop thinking about that night. It was in the early 2000s when I was still a teenager. I was usually home alone for the majority of my life. My mom was never really around. The only memories I have of her is that she was some alcoholic bimbo who always got into fights with my dad. Since then, it's just been me and my dad living in this dingy apartment complex in the downtown region of my city. I personally didn't really like it, as there were a lot of homeless people roaming the streets at night. But since we lived on the top floor, the view of the city was pretty delightful, minus the crackheads. My dad was a pretty chill dude. I basically had free reign to do whatever I wanted since he left me home alone often. He was always out on a date or working overtime trying to make ends meet, so I would often invite my friends over for sleepovers. Besides that, I was often alone. I had already gotten myself into a good bit of trouble here and there, but I had my eyes and heart set on another little plaything entirely. A cute boy across the street who I just couldn't stop thinking about. I had him wrapped around my finger before he knew it. Cell phones weren't a super common thing at the time, but I had a telephone by my bed that was wired up to the receiver, and I'd talk on that thing for hours every day. Obviously, my favorite person to call was my boyfriend next door. We lived right across the street from each other, and on the same floors in our respective buildings, so by fate, our bedroom windows faced each other. At night, when everyone else was asleep, we stayed up and talked on the phone and looked at each other through the window. We thought it was the most romantic thing in the world. It was kind of like the equivalent to FaceTime, before that was even a concept. Of course, all the FaceTime just made me want to be with him even more. It wasn't enough to just see and hear him. I wanted him in my room. With a single parent in the house and no siblings, it didn't take long for me to find an opportunity in which I was home alone. Hey, I'm going on a date tonight, so you'll be by yourself until tomorrow morning.
Okay, whatever.
You're not excited for me or anything? You don't care at all that I'm getting back out there?
Ew, Dad. Don't talk to your daughter about that. Go make friends at a bar or whatever old men do.
Okay, I see. You're busy. I'll leave you alone.
Thank you. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Anyway, what was that you were saying about me?
That you look hot tonight.
How can you even tell from all the way over there?
That's just how beautiful you are. Do me a favor. If it rains tonight, try not to get wet, because you know sugar melts.
Oh, stop it.
Okay.
No, don't actually.
Then I won't.
You know what you should do?
What?
You should come over. I'm gonna be home alone. My dad's gonna be gone all night. He's going out on some date. We should have ourselves a little date.
Really? Are you sure?
I'm very sure. It's cold, you know. I need somebody to keep me warm tonight. That could be you if you came. Just think about it. We could snuggle all night long. Just you and me. Nobody else around.
That sounds good. Really good.
Uh-huh. So are you coming over?
I will. But I have to wait for my parents to go to sleep so I can sneak out.
How long is that gonna take?
Just a few more hours.
A few more hours? Well, then you better stay on the phone with me. Keep me company.
Don't worry, I got you. We chatted for the next 2 to 3 hours while gazing at each other through the window. That boy made me wait until 3 o'clock in the morning before he got the courage to walk across the street under the nose of his parents. But before he left his place, I watched him filling his backpack with clothes and whatnot. I waited patiently in anticipation as he was getting ready and away from the telephone momentarily, since the phone cord couldn't stretch that long, nor could the phone go on speaker. When he finally finished with his shenanigans and got back on the phone, I started egging him on.
It's 3 a.m. Aren't you gonna come over? I'm getting sleepy.
Babe, I'm sorry, but it might take another hour. I heard my dad in the living room.
Are you freaking shitting me?
Don't worry, he'll be back in his bedroom in no time. Are you still home alone?
Yes, my dad left 3 hours ago. Get over here already.
Alright. I'll be over in a sec. Just give me a few more minutes. All of a sudden, Jonathan's face turned completely pale, and his eyes lit up as if he had just seen a ghost. He was suddenly silent. He dropped the phone on the ground and put his hands up to his cheeks. In an expression of sheer horror, his mouth just about fell on the floor, hanging wide open, seemingly unable to move.
Jonathan? Jonathan, you're scaring me. What the hell are you looking at? Hello? Why are you looking at me like that?
He just wouldn't move. It was like he was frozen. I waved at him frantically and kept yelling at him over the phone, but I was talking to a statue.
Is something wrong? Hey, pick up the phone. Tell me what's going on. Are you okay?
No matter how much I prodded at him to answer me, he would just stand there shaking with his hands on his cheeks, shivering like a deranged crackhead that was about to OD. The only thing I could do was watch him slowly open his mouth, more and more and more, like he was something straight out of a cartoon flick. I began to helplessly plead with him by shouting at the top of my lungs.
Answer me! You're scaring me! Pick up the phone, you idiot! Come on, talk! Say something, anything!
Finally, his arm moved, shaking as he picked up the phone and put it to his face. With his other arm, he pointed directly at me and said, You're not home alone. As soon as he said that, the lights in my bedroom flicked off. In an instant, everything was pitch black.
Oh God, please call the...
It's time for a family reunion.
There's been something I've been needing to talk about for a few years now. It was back in my second year of college. During my last semester at the university I started at before I transferred, for reasons that will become obvious. It was wintertime then, snowing constantly. I always say the reason I transferred is because transportation was a huge drag, and it was, but that's not the full reason. The buses were late all the time, and on the cold days when nobody wanted to walk, they were so jam-packed that there wasn't even a space for me to stand by the time it got to my stop. So I went about finding a different way to get there, but since I couldn't afford a car or even a bike, I had to walk, which meant I had to find a shortcut. I did find one, but it wasn't perfect. It was a trail that cut through the woods between the campus and my apartment, and it cut a good chunk of time off of my route. The only problem was that it passed by this old abandoned cabin. Well, it was abandoned, but it did have an occupant. It was some deranged old hobo guy who took shelter in it when it was cold. There were legends about him at the school. We called him Santa because he apparently only wore an old Santa suit that he must have stolen from the mall years ago. It was alleged that he always had these reindeer in the cabin with him. I figured he was some kind of animal whisperer, like they were his friends or something, because he was too much of an outcast to have human friends. If he was just there, it wouldn't have been a problem, but he lived off the people that passed by on the trail. Whenever he saw someone, he'd charge them $1. It was like the toll for taking the shortcut, and for those who didn't pay the toll would end up on the naughty list. The guy was a real menace too. The only word he could speak was dollar. But other than that, he just screamed and grunted. Obviously, this was a terrible thing to have to go through just to get to class, but I gave the bus several chances, and it was honestly worse, even for as terrifying as the shortcut was. I put up with it, and always had $2 in my pocket, one for each way. But one day, as I was passing by his house and walking up to it, because I never tried to sneak by out of the fear that he would chase me, I noticed that there were a ton of flies coming out of it. The whole thing reeked of crap. I held my breath and knocked on the door with my dollar in my hand. And right away, the freak poked his head out through the gaps in the broken door, glaring at me with the most disturbing expression ever.
Dollar.
He then reached out his crusty old hand and grabbed my wrist, pulling me in closer to him.
Dollar.
I closed my eyes reflexively and he shook my wrist until I let go of the dollar and yanked my hand back as he reached down to grab it. I ran away shouting and cursing him, totally about to piss myself. That same day when I sat down for lunch with one of my friends, I told him about what happened. He never believed in the dirty Santa legend though, and he seriously thought I was messing with him.
I'm being for real, man. There's a dirty hobo dressed like Santa on the shortcut. He's crazy. Dude, you're crazy. I've walked that trail and I didn't see anybody in that cabin because you walked it in the spring. Santa only comes during the winter. Do you hear yourself right now? Talking about Santa Claus like you still believe in him in your 20s. He's scary, man. You better not go down that trail without a couple bucks in your pocket. Or what? He'll put me on the naughty list? Yes, he will. You don't want that. Well, thanks for the warning, chicken shit, but I'm too broke to be scared out of my cash by some dirty hobo in the woods.
I really did everything I could try to make him take it seriously, but he wouldn't listen to me. I was just hoping that I was being more scared than I needed to be, and that some of the legends I heard weren't completely true. I had to stick around for another class, but my friend was done for the day and went home right after lunch. I waved goodbye to him after I reminded him where the trail was, and I made sure he had $1, but I already knew he would want to keep it for himself. When I was finally free, I walked through the shortcut a little faster than normal. My heart sank when I saw a thick trail of blood on the trail, leading right up to the cabin. My hand was shaking, but I walked up to pay my toll anyway, hoping that he had just hunted down some wild game in the forest or something. I knocked on the door and stuck my hand out with $1 clutched in it, averting my eyes until nothing happened.
Hello? Anyone home?
When there was no answer, I slowly pushed the door open, getting my first good look at the interior of the cabin. I realized then that all those reindeer I'd been seeing weren't actually real alive reindeer, but taxidermy fakes. There were dismembered deer parts everywhere, and heads up on the wall like trophies. And then, right next to them, the head of my friend looking right at the door. And that dirty Santa wannabe maniac was just sitting by the fire pit, laughing. His mouth was caked in blood, but he couldn't have looked more pleased with himself. I dropped my dollar, ran away, and didn't look back. It was in the middle of the day when I got home, but I crawled into bed and pulled the sheets over my face and tried to block out the world, suppress the memory of everything that I'd just seen, and forget about the whole thing like it was all just some terrible, awful nightmare. I couldn't even do that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my friend's head decapitated and hung up on the wall like it was a hunting trophy. So I didn't close my eyes. I kept them open all day and all night, trying to not even blink. My neighbors found out I was going insane by the second day of that, and I used it as an excuse to blame my bad mental health on the university and get transferred. I ended up changing my major completely and taking some courses abroad, just to get as far away from that school as possible. I never wanted to take that trail again. I didn't even want to think about it, but as much as I don't want to do it, I do still remember it every day. My friend was eventually reported as a missing person, but I don't even know if they ever found him. I'm not sure what even became of the dirty cabin Santa, or if people still have to pay the toll to walk that trail. Of course, I regret never saying a word about all of this until now, but at least I finally got it off my chest.
I'm I'm a 78-year-old retired car salesman living in a suburban area of Chicago, Illinois. After my wife passed away, I moved in with my son and saw a lot of stuff I never would have expected. I just didn't want to be lonely, but my son knew I was hard of mobility and still put me up in the bedroom upstairs. I've basically lived in this bedroom, and for the most part I only get up to use the bathroom down the hall. But as much as I hate to say it, I guess I was too depressed after the passing of my wife to get on my son's back about letting me live downstairs. He would probably never budge anyway. He's got a job and a whole family of his own, so he's too busy to even think about the old cadre wasting away upstairs. Sometimes I wonder if they've all forgotten about me. They barely come into my room to talk to me anyway, and it's getting to be more and more that the people in my TV shows feel like closer friends than my own son and grandkids. They get so bored that I even spy on my neighbors just to have something to do. My bed is close enough to the window that I can see into their backyard without getting up. For a few years, I think I saw more of that family than I did my own. It was a middle-aged guy named Mike, who was living with his mother and sister. Well, I don't know who owned the property, but I figured it was Mike's based on what I ended up seeing happen there. I swear, those folks seemed nice on the outset. Nothing to evoke suspicion, just quaint, happy little lives that made me feel more comfortable in my own boring, bedridden existence. I'd seen them talk to each other on their back porch in the evenings or go out gardening in the mornings, and I never heard anything unusual for the longest time. That was until a couple years after I moved in, around Christmas time. I had just turned off the TV and was turning in to sleep for the night when I heard people arguing.
Go to hell, you stupid tramp! You're a sorry piece of crap!
The voices weren't familiar, so I knew it was coming from next door. At some point, the shouting became screaming, and I started hearing all sorts of other noises going along with it. Doors slamming, glass breaking, loud thuds, the whole business. Then, it all just stopped. I was tired, so I assumed it was just an argument that ran itself out of steam, but I had a nagging feeling about it that played with my sleep. Some hours later, at what turned out to be 4 a.m., I was woken up by more noises. I looked out my window and saw Mike in the backyard. I had no idea what he was doing, but he was in a Grinch costume hauling some big Christmas sack to the tree by the garden shed. Then he opened the shed and grabbed a shovel and started digging, and I realized he was burying that bag in the frozen dirt. I didn't know what to think of it. It must have taken him an entire 30 minutes before he finished and went back inside his house. The only thing I could think was that he was some hyper-dedicated geezer playing the role of the Grinch, trying to hide some stolen donations from an orphanage or something. I don't know. I'd always thought he was a nice guy, so there was no explanation that sat right with me. I waited until morning to tell my son. Of course, he didn't believe me. He thought I was just a crazy old coot, and so did everybody else in the house. And with nobody to back me up, I started to believe them. I ended up brushing it aside and forgetting about it. The weird thing about it, though, was that I never saw the neighbor's mother ever again. She was the one who always tended the garden, but after all that happened, she was never there to take care of the plants. However, I still saw Mike and his sister outside on the porch from time to time, but they never looked quite as happy. After a while, everything went back to normal, until about 4 years later. After so much time, my son tried befriending his neighbors. He would always try to talk to them, but they would just give him a gaunt stare and say nothing, eventually going back inside their house. Both of them, the brother and sister, were definitely a weird bunch. But things got a little more disturbing right around Christmas, just like before. It seemed like it was happening all over again. There was shouting, then screaming, then a tussle and a thud, then a sudden silence. This time, I stayed up to watch. This all happening twice was way too strange for me to sleep on it. It was right around 4 in the morning again. I stood up out of my bed to get a closer look out the window. I could see him coming out the back door. He was again dressed as the Grinch, dragging a big bag of something to the tree and burying it under the dirt. That's when out of nowhere, Mike turned his head and looked straight into my window. I quickly closed the blinds, but he had already seen me. A few minutes later, I couldn't help but peek. And what else did I see but the man himself in the window right across from mine, still in costume, glaring at me. I tried to act casual and play it off. So I opened the window and tried to make conversation across the way. Nice Grinch outfit. Thanks, buddy. Nice night out too, isn't it? Indeed it is. So, what are you doing up so late? That's when Mike stares at me, not saying a word. Anyway, have a good rest of your night. Merry Christmas. Then, Mike waves his hand by, and in that moment, I saw a flash of blood soaked into the palm of his hand. Right away, he realized he made a mistake and tried to cover for it by closing the blinds immediately. But it was too late. I laid starkly awake all night after that, worried with anxious thoughts about what the reason for that bloody hand could have been from. The only conclusion I could reach was that he'd taken the life of his mother and sister and buried them in the backyard to keep it a secret. I didn't bother telling my son because I knew he would just brush me off, so I eventually called the cops. By morning, the cops were out in front of Mike's house, and he was immediately apprehended. Turns out that Mike's mother died in an altercation with his sister, and he helped her cover it up. Over the years, the sister had gotten ill and eventually died young. As for why he wanted to bury her in the backyard too, it was alleged that he did it for financial reasons. Just goes to show what people will do when money is tight. But if you ask me, I think the cops barely got half the truth out of that guy. I bet something way worse happened inside that house. The story was inspired by a downright terrifying incident that happened in Chicago, Illinois. Here's the photograph of the quote-unquote Grinch, a man named Michael who was 45 years old at the time. He has since been charged with concealing the deaths of the deceased family members mentioned in the story of his backyard.
This story took place a few winters ago. When I was a young teenager, I was going through the phase where I really wasn't getting along with my family. I preferred spending time with my friends and always getting up to trouble. The holidays were definitely a tense time with all that going on. I couldn't stand seeing my parents, so of course I did everything I could to get out of going with them on some dragged out holiday vacation. Where are you going? You should be getting ready for the trip. I don't want to go on this stupid trip. I'll be back later. No, you won't! You're gonna stay and you're gonna pack up! I'll do it later. My friends are waiting on me. Well, if you're gonna choose those dirty lowlives over family, then we'll just leave without you. Then leave! I should have left you in the dumpster and not in your mother. Instead of getting ready for the big trip, I wanted to go to my friend's spot in the woods, where there was a cool old treehouse we'd all hang out at. After I got into it with my dad, I decided I wanted to stay out all night, which my friends were happy to hear after thinking I was going to be gone for the holidays. Well, fast forward another few hours and I was going belligerent by drinking from our so-called soda bottles in the safety of the treehouse. I don't recall much at all about what occurred during that night, except chatting with this attractive girl named Stephanie. But other than being able to barely comprehend my surroundings, I did, however, remember passing out and waking up right next to her and a couple other people on the floor of the treehouse. As soon as I opened my eyes, I could tell that I'd slept way later than I had anticipated. All of a sudden, I came to my senses and rushed home, hoping that I hadn't actually been left there home alone. Unfortunately, I knew by the lack of cars in the driveway that they really had left without me. That's when I came to the realization that I stupidly thought to never bring my key when I stormed off that day before. I checked the front door, back door, and even tried prying the side windows open, but everything was locked shut. I was cold, hungry, and hungover. I started freaking out and then used a rock to break through the kitchen window by the back door so I could reach around and unlock the door into the house. Once inside, I did what I could to clean up the glass, but there was no replacing the door window. Instead, I sealed it off with duct tape, just so there wouldn't be too bad of a draft. A few minutes later, I called my mom to chew her out for leaving me behind. How could you leave me home alone? What kind of mother are you?
What kind of mother am I? What kind of son are you?
You probably had me with some random guy, and that's why you and Dad hate me.
You will not talk to me like that, young man.
Then I won't talk to you, you hoe. When that didn't go well, I tried calling up that girl I passed out with, but that was a bust too. She said she couldn't hang out until after she got back from the holidays with her family. That's when I came to the realization that I was going to be by myself for Christmas, completely alone, in a big house with no one around. By 10 p.m., I was an emotional wreck, so I crawled into bed and tried to get some sleep. It was barely 10 minutes later when I started hearing loud noises coming from the kitchen downstairs. I snuck out of bed and peeked down the stairs, and there I saw two men standing menacingly in my kitchen. And that's when I made the dumbest mistake of my life. Ah! I screamed at the top of my lungs out of sheer panic, and that's when the robbers immediately looked at me. I turned around and ran back to my room and locked the door. I panicked and called my mom. She made me wait until the last ring. I was just about to give up and call the cops, but she had just answered when the robbers broke down my door and charged into my room. Right away, one of them ran at me, picked me up, and tossed me on the bed like I was made of air, just to show me I stood no chance against them. Then, it was all just screaming. Hey kid, where's the money at? Yeah kid, come on. Where did they keep the jewelry, huh? Spit it out. I don't know. Please help me, mommy. Look at him, calling for his mommy. You better dry up. We ain't even started hooking you up to car batteries yet. Hey, shut up. Look at this. He's on the phone with her right now. Isn't that nice?
What's going on? Who's there? Who are you, and what are you doing with my son?
Oh, don't worry, Mrs. Crybaby. Your wimpy little son is just fine, and he'll stay that way if you tell us the combination to your safe and where to find it.
What are you talking about? We don't have a safe.
That's baloney. Shut up. Forget the safe. Where's your money? Your jewels. If you don't tell us, then your son's gonna pay for it.
I'm telling you, we're not that rich. We don't have a safe or jewels or anything like that.
Please, believe her. Believe her. Shut up. You know what, kid? I say we ought to make him scream so his mommy can hear. Forget that hoe. She's dumb as rocks. We can't keep wasting time. We gotta make a move. Fast. Now. All right, wise guy. What should we do? I think she's bluffing. Let's ransom the kid. What? No, please. I'll do anything. Shut up. The next thing I knew, they put duct tape over my mouth and dragged me out of the room. I screamed and fought back against them, but they carried me down the stairs with one of them holding me by the legs and the other by the arms, and there was no way I could get out of their grip. And then, to my relief, I heard police sirens approaching my house until they were basically right outside. The two robbers then threw me down on the couch, and I wasn't able to see much of what happened, but I heard the robbers try to escape out the back door, only to be cut off by cops and arrested. For a while, I thought it was my mom who called the cops, but I didn't understand how they could have responded so quickly. As it turns out, it was the girl who called them. The girl that I met at the treehouse who gave me her number. She recently moved in just a few doors down from me and said when she heard some strange noises outside and went to investigate, she saw the two men snooping around my backyard and called the cops right away. Man, if things had gone differently, I might have wifed her.
It's all hazy now. I can't even trace back how I got here. All I remember was sitting on the rim of this huge purple circle, the top of a pit that went down so far I couldn't even see the bottom. Everything around me was just pure darkness. There was this giant screen, like from a movie theater, but at first, I couldn't even tell it wasn't real. I thought I was actually looking through the walls of my house and into my living room. Laying on the carpet in the middle of the floor was DW, and as usual, she was reading one of her magazines. That's when I called out to her. Hey, DW!
Hey!
Her loud voice startled me. I staggered backwards, trying to catch myself, then slipped and tumbled forward, falling straight down into the purple pit. And that's when everything went dark. Whatever happened immediately after is just a blank space for me. Sometime later, I came to, disoriented, and in excruciating pain all over my body. I had no idea where I was. The space I was in made no sense to me. It was purple, just like the top, and it had 4 walls in a square that rose up to dizzying heights. But other than that, there was nothing else. No windows, no door, no furniture, not even a light. I could only see because there was this eerie glow emanating from the walls. I struggled to my feet, every bone in my body in agony, and hobbled over to the wall, hoping that it was just a sheet or something, that there would be something on the other side. But there wasn't. It was just a solid wall. There wasn't anything for me to climb on either. It was all completely smooth and featureless, like some kind of demented prison. I then tried squeezing myself into the corner and shimmying up the wall. I might have gotten about 6 inches off the ground before I slipped, and no matter how many times I attempted it, I couldn't get any higher than I could by jumping. Every time I failed, the pain in my body grew, and the direness of my situation became increasingly obvious. At a loss, I collapsed and began to cry.
Hey! Somebody! Help me! Is anybody there? Please!
My voice just echoed. Above me was the purple circle from which I'd fallen, looming over my head, mocking me. After a few minutes, I dried my tears and picked myself up, then went for a different approach. I thought maybe I could just beat my way through these walls, so I punched and kicked and charged into it, putting all my rage into every strike. But each time I was deflected, and all my efforts were for nothing. It's not real. This is just a dream, a nightmare. That's all. None of this is real. I'll wake up soon, and I'll run and hug Mom.
Help! Can anybody help me?
Arthur? Arthur? Is that you, Arthur?
Hey! Who's there? Where are you? Answer the question, you dumb rat! Hey, I'm not a rat!
But you are Arthur, aren't you?
What? Who are you? Let me out of here before I call the cops!
I want to play a game. I looked all over for where that voice was coming from, but it was so echoey in that room that it was no use. I was starting to think that I would be trapped in this dark room while this sicko tormented me for the rest of my existence. There was no way to keep track of how much time had passed. There was no sunlight, just the same level of constant purple darkness. But it must have been days before that voice came back. By then, I was so hungry and thirsty. I was starving, and things were getting so bad, I didn't even have a bucket. I had to choose a corner of the room to be the corner that I did my business in, while I huddled in the opposite corner waiting for nothing. Hey, Arthur, you hungry yet?
Yes, please, I'm starving. Give me some food. I'll do anything, I swear.
You swear you'll do anything?
Yes, anything.
Well, alright then. If you want food, do 100 jumping jacks.
Wait, really? That's it? Do 100 jumping jacks now! Before I give this delicious food away! Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I was expecting to be put through a lot worse, but then again it made sense. There was nothing around me that I could do anything with. And honestly, being in there with nothing to do was maddening. It was uninterrupted solitary confinement, so I would have gladly done a lot worse just for the stimulation. Little did I know, the jumping jacks were only the beginning.
100! There, I did it! Now give me something to eat!
Just then, something got tossed in from the other side of the hole. It splattered onto the ground and I rushed over to it. It was a hunk of meat still on the bone. Some kind of rare steak, I thought, but I had no idea. It could have been anything. I devoured it regardless and sucked the fat off the bone, chewing on the sinew at the joint and then beating it on the ground to break it open and suck out the marrow. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. From then on, that was the routine. I would be forced to sit in nothingness for hours upon hours, biting my nails and picking at the walls. And then, after waiting for eternity, my captor would give me a stupid, ridiculous task, each one worse than the last. There was even a time where he made me do a humiliating dance and threatened not to feed me if I didn't do it for an hour straight.
Hey! Can I please sit? My knees can't handle this dance anymore! Dance! 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 Dance!
I had no choice. It was that or starvation. And each time, the reward was the same. A slightly different cut from the same mysterious animal, usually still attached to the bone, not seasoned with anything. Just strips and chunks of raw flesh, but they were delicious. Of course, I started looking forward to it.
Hey! How long do I have to keep doing this? When am I gonna get out of here?
Maybe after you clean out my freezer. And I say, hey, what a wonderful kind of day, where you can learn to walk and play, and get along with each other. This story is from the point of view of a 15-year-old boy. I had lived in this dingy 2-story house since the day I was born. It was quite the dread living in, as the heaters would malfunction during the winter, so we always made sure to have the fireplace on. But what made the house extra terrifying was how close it was to a prison. I've always wondered for a very long time why my parents chose to live in such a dangerous place. So last year I pestered my dad about moving out and looking for a better place to stay. But every time I try to persuade him, He would brush me off and tell me how this house had been passed down for generations and had always brought good fortune and prosperity to the family. As an only child, my parents felt it would be appropriate to hire a nanny, someone they could trust to take care of me, especially when they were out. So ever since I was 2, this old nanny was basically my roommate. Her presence made me feel safer and less frightened about the nearby prison. However, I still had the habit of looking out my window, checking out the massive wall topped with barbed wire flowing with electricity. I couldn't tell whether I was amazed or if some part of me was still afraid. I mean, who wouldn't be? If you knew your neighbors were some of the most diabolical people ever known to mankind clustered under one roof, wouldn't that make your heart beat a little faster? Knowing this prison had maximum security, I felt a sense of relief that prompted me to close the curtain and go to bed. Then, the following night, I came home late after playing games at my friend's house a few blocks away. And upon seeing our garage empty, I knew my parents weren't home yet. But it didn't matter. I knew Sabrina would be home to keep me company like she always did, even if we didn't have long conversations. However, when I entered the kitchen to grab something from the fridge, I read a note from Sabrina saying she had to go home to rectify an issue involving her close relatives. In her note, she promised that she'd try to come back as soon as possible, and so she reminded me to keep all the doors and windows locked and to hit the sack early. However, without supervision, I instead took the opportunity to play my phone. And when I checked the time, noticing it was 12, I decided to call it a night. Then, lying comfortably on the bed with my eyes heavy as sandbags, I heard loud footsteps emanating from downstairs. Half asleep, I jolted. I initially thought the nanny had returned with some heavy bag or something. I hastily ran down the stairs to greet her, even though she often told me not to. But as I descended to the first floor, a cold sensation wrapped around my skin. Then, gazing into the darkness before me, my throat went dry as I called out and said,
Sabrina, is that you?
I waited, but there was no answer, and so I called out to her once more.
Hey, Sabrina!
However, nothing but silence filled the air.
Sabrina, this isn't funny!
I yelled in exasperation. Then, seconds later, I heard one of her trash bins topple over, followed by a low, menacing chuckle. I stood still, and as soon as my body quivered, I had second thoughts about staying there, convinced that the best thing to do was just run upstairs and hide. However, I was too scared to move. Moments later, someone began to emerge from the darkness, and as the mysterious person came toward me, revealing their identity under the foyer's dim lights, I instantly recognized it wasn't Sabrina. Instead, it was a large man. He was lean and about 7 feet tall, wearing an orange t-shirt and pants. He had long, thinning hair, and was disheveled like he hadn't showered in days. He didn't say a word, and that was the most terrifying thing. Not knowing what he planned to do made me panic. Then, all hell broke loose when the large man made direct eye contact with me. Triggered by the adrenaline, I began sprinting up the stairs, locked myself in a room, and hid under the bed. It never crossed my mind that I would come face to face with a stranger in my house, but I didn't know where else to go. As I bit my nails in sheer terror, I could hear the man running around my house, smashing into walls and tearing the place down. Soon, I heard the sounds of furniture breaking and glass shattering, and then, that's when all the lights around the house went out.
You can't hide from me!
I tried to crawl out from under the bed, desperately searching for a phone to call 911, but I couldn't see amidst the darkness. Still, I didn't give up. However, as time passed, I heard the commotion downstairs finally cease, followed by something more terrifying. That's when I hear footsteps coming up the stairs. They were slow but heavy. I knew if I didn't find my phone quickly, I may never see daylight again. So in my frantic attempt to find my phone, I suddenly hit what appeared to be a drawer. That's when everything went quiet. I didn't even want to breathe. I knew I had stupidly blown my cover. I then heard the creep opening the doors to the other rooms one by one. Mine was at the end of the hallway, so I knew he would eventually inspect this room as well. As soon as I grabbed my phone, I crawled underneath the bed once more, where I instantly contacted 911 and said,
Hello, this is an emergency. There's a giant stranger. There's a giant man in my house. Please help.
I tried to keep my voice down as I described the man. At this point, I swear I could hear the man breaking more stuff from the 3 other rooms.
Hey, buddy, where are you? Come out, wherever you are.
And that's when I heard my door creak open. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't even breathe. I held my hands across my mouth the entire time. And that's when the most terrifying thing happened. The man yanked me from underneath the bed and started slamming me onto it. I broke free from his grasp and was cornered by his enormous stature. That's when I slapped both of my hands on my cheeks and wailed in misery. I legitimately thought my life was going to be over, until I heard several police officers shouting at the man to get on the floor. Since I live next to a penitentiary, officers were always roaming close to my house, and it didn't take long until they barged through the front door and apprehended the man. Later on, I discovered that the creep was a convicted murderer who disguised himself as one of the security staff, allowing him to escape the prison. Consequently, when my parents found out about the incident, they finally decided it was time to move out and find a safer neighborhood to live in.
This story happened during the Christmas holidays. I'm a father, a husband, and a breadwinner, which entailed me to work overtime more often than not. Of course, it was infuriating, as I wanted to be home with my family rather than trapped in a cubicle for hours on end. I had been trying to persuade my boss to offer me a home-based job. I'd always get on his good side, hoping to enlighten him regarding the benefits of working remotely. However, no matter what I did, he kept rejecting my pitch, looking for ways to bombard me with overtime work. There was never enough time for me to get a decent rest until vacation finally arrived. However, with only 3 days off, namely Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and Boxing Day, it still felt like I needed more time to rejuvenate. So, in the end, it still wasn't much of a vacation for me. When I'd see my boss and all the others from the upper management leave the office early while the lower echelon were given additional tasks, I'd bite my lower lip in frustration. But every night when I'd arrive home, I'd always find my wife sleeping soundly, exhausted from all the work, house cleaning, and cooking, in addition to taking care of our son. On weekends, whenever I had the chance to check up on my son in his bedroom, I'd usually find him drawing and eating a variety of chocolates. When I asked my son where he had gotten them, he would reply with,
Willy Wonka gave them to me.
Willy Wonka? Are you talking about Mr. Francis? I replied, assuming it was one of his male teachers. He would then reply with,
Nope, I said Willy Wonka, not Mr. Francis, Dad.
Without a tinge of reluctance, I scolded him, telling him the chocolates were bad for him. As a result, he ran to his mother to complain about how I was being a horrible parent. Through the years, my son and I had grown estranged since I was barely home. I would arrive home to watch my son draw while munching on these alleged Willy Wonka chocolates, which irked me every so often. Whenever I tried to speak to my wife about it, she would always brush it off like it wasn't a big deal. I remember even calling the school just to complain about it, but every time I'd call, they'd respond the same way, denying the school's engagement and handing out chocolates irresponsibly. Moreover, they'd claim to have no association with Willy Wonka's products. So one day I waited for my boss to head out of the office so I could sneak out of work, and when the coast was clear, I drove to my son's school, concealing myself amongst the trees near the playground, wearing a trench coat with binoculars in hand. I just had to know where the hell my son was getting these chocolates from. When he eventually left the school, I noticed him walking towards a different direction instead of the way home. This immediately prompted me to follow him. Moments later, I saw him enter an abandoned building by the corner of the street. I let about a minute go by before I followed him in there and snuck inside. That's when I noticed standing before me was a chocolate factory towering over me like an edifice that came straight out of a novel. And the more I gazed into the mammoth structure, the more I realized it resembled the one I saw in Willy Wonka's movie, with ramps and lines everywhere. I must be going nuts, I told myself. But despite my doubts, I went deep into the rabbit hole. There were oddly shaped machines and contraptions left and right. Moments later, I saw my son speaking to a man dressed up as Willy Wonka from a distance. He literally looked like the character in the film, as he wore the same giant top hat and sleek velvet coat. I couldn't help but wonder what this man's true identity was, and what's his purpose for meeting my son. It would soon become evident as I listened intently to their conversation.
So, my dear boy, you finally made it here. School's such a drag, isn't it? Kinda. This can all be yours if you want, but you must leave school so you can live here full time and have all the chocolates you want. Well, that sounds like fun, but no buts! The only but that matters here is what's in those boy.
What the hell is he doing? For reasons I couldn't understand, something was off. Like he was trying to take my son, luring him in with these chocolates.
Anyway, here are the chocolates you asked for. Take them home and come back the next day for more. But before I let you go, I have a I want you to try.
I tackled the creep to the ground and restrained him as I yelled at my son, saying,
"Don't just stand there, you idiot! Call the cops, now!"
Out of fear, he did what I instructed him to do, and soon the police arrived, arresting Willy Wonka. Moments later, as I spoke to the investigators, I discovered that the man behind the disguise wasn't a stranger. He was my boss. It became clear why my boss left early for work all this time. He left me in the office to do all the work, just so he could lavish in his obsession for sweets and give them to my son. But what makes this story all the more disturbing was how my son's drawings that he had been invested in all this time was just drawings of Willy Wonka. All this time knowing that this was happening behind my back makes me sick every time I see chocolate anywhere I go.
I've always loved winter more than any other season. I like to go out into the backyard and make a dozen snow forts, snowballs, and other random snow sculptures, depending on how soft the snow was. Recently, though, there's been a stain on my enjoyment of winter, and it's all my brother Arthur's fault. There was a snowball that I used to keep in my freezer that reminded me of a sentimental day, but I know that four-eyed pig took it, that dirty liar. I know he took my snowball. I can't imagine what he wanted with it, except to torment me. I'll never forgive him. I don't even like leaving my room anymore. My family is like a bunch of monsters. Whenever I go into the kitchen, I feel like Arthur is always sitting there, stuffing his face with all the food in the house, and he never has anything nice to say to me, just mean things. Hey, DW, have you decided to stop hiding from us yet?
No, I'm just going to play in the snow. You better not come with me, you snowball thief.
Oh my god, is that snowball all you care about? Come on, DW, grow up already.
That was my favorite snowball, and you probably ate it because you thought it was vanilla ice cream, you big fat pig.
Hey!
All right already, what's going on in here? Mom, Arthur's picking on me again. Why? What's he doing that's so bad? I told you he took my snowball, and now he's rubbing it in my face. Arthur, is that true?
No, I never took her snowball. She's lying.
No, he's lying. He's a dirty, rotten liar, and I hate him. Now, DW, that's no way to talk to your brother. We've been over this snowball crap a million times already. It's snowing outside, so there's no need to cry and moan about a silly snowball when you can go and make 100 more in the backyard. But it won't be the same. Shut up! Just go outside and make another snowball, you whiny little brat. How many times do I have to deal with this stupid snowball crap? I don't want to go anymore. I don't care what you want. Get out of my sight before I get my Louis Vuitton belt and make LV signs all over your stinking ass.
That means go to your room, DW.
Don't test me, little boy. Stupid fat bastard, eating all my food. I should have never made either of those little twerps. I hate you!
I hate you more! I didn't care what any of them said. I only went back to my room because I forgot to put on my coat before going out into the snow. But on my way there, I noticed Arthur's door was just the slightest bit open, enough for me to see his desk. I stopped and peeked in, and legit saw my favorite snowball half melted onto the same plate sitting there in his room. Hey! That snake, he snuck up behind me. He probably put it where I could see it on purpose. What are you doing, stupid, inside my room?
Nothing. Nothing at all. I was just wondering if you'd like to go outside and play in the snow with me?
Like I'd ever want to play with you.
Why couldn't Mom have just taken a plan B?
I got my winter clothes on and went outside to the backyard. I always felt so much better out there than I did trapped inside with those horrible people, no matter what the weather was like. I wanted to build a snowman that day, since snowballs have been ruined for me. Of course, a snowman starts with a big snowball on the bottom and then smaller ones on top of it. I was just about to start putting on the snowman's head when I started to feel like I was being watched. I looked up to Arthur's window and realized he was watching me from his room. I got mad and chucked a snowball at his window. It exploded into powder, but he didn't even flinch. He just closed the blinds. That's when I heard loud footsteps ascending from the staircase. And then out came Arthur, grilling me right in the face. Dora Winifred, Dora Winifred, Dora Winifred!
Leave me alone or I'm calling Mr. Ratburn!
What the hell is he gonna do? Give me a D on my next exam?
I thought he already gave you the D.
Why, you little...
I was terrified. He didn't even look like my brother. He looked like the most evil monster I've ever seen. He just kept looking at me with these horrific eyes. I backpedaled and armed myself with another snowball. I didn't have anything to defend myself. So in a panic, I thought I could throw some snow into his eyes, but
Give me that snowball!
he lunged at me, grabbing my wrist and biting the snowball right out of my hand. He almost took a finger with it too, and devoured it like a rabid animal. As soon as he was done, he turned on the half-finished snowman. While he was distracted with it, I ran inside and hid under the kitchen table. Arthur flew in behind me, stomping around and calling my name, taunting me. Dora Winifred, where are you? I wanna...
Eat all your snowballs! Found you!
That's when he found me hiding under the table. He flipped the table over with so much force that it broke in half when it landed on the ground. I didn't know what else to do, so I ran as fast as I could into the backyard again. Arthur was right behind me, running faster than he ever had, like it wasn't even him controlling his body anymore. He grabbed me by the hair and yanked me back, spun me around and then held me up by the collar, an inch from his face. So close I could smell the stench of his breath. He opened up his mouth so wide that I could see all of his teeth were jagged and sharp like a monster. And right then, I knew he was about to bite my head off.
Stop! Wait! You want snowballs, right? Look over there! Right there! There's the bottom of the snowman still! That's a huge snowball! Won't you eat that instead and spare me? Please, Arthur?
He grunted without saying a word and threw me aside. By the time I picked myself up and looked at him, he was already stuffing the entire giant snowball into his mouth to devour in one bite. He started to chew, and at first, there was the crunch of snow, but then the crunch of something else. Blood began to ooze from his lips. He looked so confused. It was funny, really, how easily he fell for it.
How does your favorite dog in the whole world taste, Arthur? That's right. I rolled up little old pal into that snowman because I knew you wouldn't be able to help yourself around my snowballs. You absolute moron. You should have just admitted what you did. Then maybe your best friend would still be alive.
No! Ah!
I'm a big gal, so I have my troubles with dating. Just to get people in the door, I have to resort to catfishing. Otherwise, none of them would ever even consider meeting me in person. As soon as they see me, there's a 98% chance that they just run away and ghost me. That other 2% of them that stick around, though, those are the ones I'm so persistent for. I definitely understand what makes them stay. There's plenty of Margaret to go around. More woman that they could ever dream of, and almost always more than they can handle. But I still have my fun. Voluptuous hardly even begins to describe the body that those ever so tasteful men get to take to bed. They should consider themselves lucky. There's been this one little cutie I've been dating for a while, and his name is Gilbert. I think I'll take things to the next level with him soon. Like most of the men who ended up having the attraction to me, he's a real skinny one. We hit off though, as they say, opposites attract. But we have a common interest in getting together with some Netflix on the TV and some Uber Eats on the table. That's been our routine for a couple weeks now, but as much as I like it, especially since he pays for all of it, can you really fault a girl for getting bored of the same thing over and over again? Recently, I've been dropping Gilbert subtle hints for him to take this thing more seriously, if you know what I mean. He knows he's my main squeeze, or at least that I want him to be, but he also knows I mess around with other guys. I think that's what's making him ride the brakes. He feels a little threatened. I like it that way though. I like to put a man's manhood into question. They do all sorts of crazy stuff when you do that, and it's been an interesting ride with Gilbert the whole way. We started things out by putting on horror movies so we could cuddle and spoon on the couch, but of course that didn't work for long, because Gilbert kept complaining that he couldn't see the TV. I didn't like him saying that, even though he didn't mean to make me me feel bad, but he did have to go and remind me that I basically take up the whole couch. So I offered a sly little solution. I sit up on the couch and he sits in my lap. Another way was me laying on my side while Gilbert sat right on top of me, like how Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Obviously, he agreed right away, and I could tell how much he loved it. When I saw that, it made me so happy. I go through a lot of boyfriends because it's hard for me to get one to stick around, but when I see a man succumb to my ways and means like that, I know I'll get to keep them. Still, Gilbert was a man after all, so it was only a matter of time before that position started to make him feel emasculated. That's when I knew we were ready to take things to the next level.
Hey, Meg?
Yes, Gilbert, baby?
I know you like being on the bottom, but what do you think about me being on the bottom?
Oh, but I'm too big to be on top. You'll get hurt, you poor fragile little thing.
You see, but it's just that, right there. I don't want to feel like a fragile man when I'm with you. I mean, I don't want you to feel like you're with a man who's too weak to handle all of you.
Gilbert, baby boy, you are too weak to handle all of me. Trust me.
Well, don't doubt me, mistress. I'll do what I want.
Now I like that attitude. Feisty. Well, alright then. Let me hear all about what you want to do.
I want to lay on the couch with my woman in my arms, and I want to watch a wonderful night's worth of Netflix with her till we both fall asleep in a loving embrace.
Oh, you're such a flowery romantic. You're such a well-spoken man.
He was just so confident about it that even though I'm usually too self-conscious about my size to ever do it, I did it for him. We got up to trade places on the couch. He laid down with his long, skinny body open to me, and I laid down right on top of him. I always forget what it feels like to have a man try to grab as much of me as possible at once. Gilbert was totally disappeared underneath me, completely surrounded by my curves and essence. He immediately started moaning super loud and squirming with pleasure. The little twig was actually making it hard to relax.
Stop! Gilbert! You're tickling me! Stop it! I'm trying to watch the TV! Gilbert, shut up! You're talking over the best part of the movie.
After the initial rush of excitement washed over, Gilbert calmed down a little bit.
See, isn't it nice to settle in? Now we can just Netflix and chill, you know? We can unwind and decompress, and all you had to do was simmer down. Of course, it's flattering to know that I can get you so excited, but come on, dear, a real man should be able to get a hold of himself.
He became very submissive after a few minutes. I guess me grilling him like I was his mother might have put a damper on his masculinity, but whatever. Unfortunately, after a few minutes, I started to miss Gilbert's banter. He wasn't even trying to say anything anymore. I got bored of the horror movie eventually, so to try to put some energy back into things, I played one of my favorite stand-up comedians. He always gets me busting a gut right away.
Don't you think he's just hilarious, Gil? What a riot! Gilbert, why aren't you saying anything? Gilbert? Oh well, Margaret, it's not your fault. It's just how it goes.
That was the end of my little fling with Gilbert, I guess. He was fun while he lasted, but his time to go had come. So I got up from the couch and took him to the closet where the rest of them go when I'm done with them.
Jeez Louise, I'm gonna have to reorganize here soon. Things are just flying off the shelves every time I open the door.
And I do go through a lot of boyfriends. They just can't get enough of me, but I still have trouble getting them to stick around for some Netflix and chill.
This story is from the perspective of a woman. I'm a single mother of a young teenage boy. I'm very busy with work, which means we don't have a lot of opportunities for quality time. So I like to take him with me when I go out to run errands and go shopping and whatnot. This last Christmas Eve, I took my son to the mall. Obviously, the whole place was a madhouse, but there were holiday deals and discounts all across the board, so I braved the chaos. I got my son to play a game of sorts where we would both look for the best price cuts and bonus points for anything that could be bought with food stamps. Unfortunately, he didn't find it that interesting. He played along for a little bit so I wouldn't feel bad, because he's a sweet boy. but he's definitely getting to be too old to be duped into things like that. Or at least, I thought he was maturing. I was in the Foot Locker when I realized I lost him. I immediately left to go searching. That's when I noticed a giant crowd forming outside the store. I headed out to see what the commotion was about, and there stood a man dressed up as the Grinch. I'd never seen a costume so accurate to the Jim Carrey Grinch like that before. All I knew was that this guy fit the bill if Hollywood ever needed to hire a Grinch actor. I then spotted my son waiting in line to go up and get a picture with him. I started to scold him for running off and wanted to drag him back inside, but he turned out to be far more interested in getting that picture than I thought.
Jamie, where have you been? You can't just run off like that. What if somebody took you?
I'm sorry, Mom. I wanted to take a picture with the Grinch.
How about Santa? He seems lame.
I want to pic with the Grinch, not Santa. If I wanted to pic with Santa, I would have just took a pic with your ex.
I took the time out of my schedule to give my son what he wanted. The whole time we were in line, I was looking at the Grinch character. Something deep down inside me made me not trust him. He kept glancing over at us the whole time, despite the large crowd hovering around him. What made things even more strange was how he didn't break eye contact. He just kept looking at us while other folks took photos with him. I was slowly warming up to the whole idea of actually meeting him, but that's about when things started getting really weird. When it was my son's turn to get a photograph, the Grinch sat down by the bench and instructed my son to sit on his lap, despite taking standing shoulder-to-shoulder photos with every other person.
Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. What's your name, little boy?
My name is Jamie.
Jamie, you don't have to sit on his lap if you don't want to.
It's okay, Mom. I want to.
Are you sure?
Are you deaf, lady? He said he wants to.
I was completely taken aback. I wanted to bite his head off when he snapped at me like that. Everyone around us thought it was amusing, making me the laughingstock of them all. I didn't want to look like a Karen or something. So instead of freaking out right then and there, I did what I had to do to keep it together. But I made sure to stay within 30 feet of them.
So, little boy, how have you been?
What?
I said, how have you been? How's it going, kid?
I mean, it's good, but aren't you supposed to ask me what I want for Christmas?
What do you think this is, some kind of charity? I'm the Grinch, not Santa. You've been hanging out with your hoe mom too much. She probably gets Christmas gifts every day with that dump truck.
I think I want to go now.
Wait, I'll get you what you want for Christmas. I know what it is already. You want to get rid of that helicopter mom over there, right?
What? No, let me go.
Where do you think you're going, you little weasel?
Let him go, you freak!
I slapped the creep right in the face. I grabbed my son and we got the hell out of there. Nobody in the crowd got in our way. They made room for us, actually. I guess their tune changed when they saw the way that man was interacting with my son. We didn't go back into the mall. We went straight for the car. When we got there, I was so worked up about the whole thing that I had to let my heart settle for a second before I could even think about driving away. I then said to my son,
Are you okay, Jamie?
He was about to answer. But then I heard the most blood-curdling scream a mother could ever hear. I looked up from my hands and saw in the rearview mirror that somebody had yanked Jamie right out of the backseat of my car. I literally screamed from the top of my lungs. That's when I realized the same green bastard was attempting to kidnap my son. I rushed out, stunned as the man stuffed Jamie into the backseat of his car. I tried to pull him off, but he was unhinged. With one blow, he pushed me away and knocked the wind out of me. I watched in horror as he slammed the door and drove off with my son. I immediately got up and started to scream and holler, desperately trying to get the whole parking lot's attention. Then, one of the security officers raced past me in their car and made a beeline straight for them, going way too fast to stop. That's when they collided with the kidnapper who was making a left turn, causing him to spin out to a halting stop. The security officer stumbled out of his car, clearly dazed by the impact, but he still kept going like some kind of retired cop. He apprehended the man while I ran over to make sure my son was okay. He was a little shaken up by the crash, but thankfully, he only had a few minor scratches and bruises. But as it turns out, that man that kidnapped my son was his own father, my worthless ex-husband. He put together the whole plan, following me around to see where I went, posing as the Grinch. The scumbag knew our son's favorite Christmas movie and tried to use it against us because he disagreed with the court's decision to give me full custody. But after that little stuff, his son will be an adult by the time he gets out of prison. That's what the dirtbag gets for putting his son through a traumatic experience on Christmas Eve. The story was inspired by a case that happened on Christmas Eve. A distraught father used a tracking device to follow his ex-partner to a shopping center. He then blocked her car in and grabbed their child in a sinister and disturbing attempt to take him out of the country.